Hey, it's Mike Hambright with FlipNerd.com. Welcome back for another exciting VIP interview where I interview some of the most successful real estate investing experts and entrepreneurs in the industry to help you learn and grow. Today I'm joined by attorney Matthew Mullhofer, who has extensive experience in many areas including estate planning and asset protection. Today Matthew is going to share some great advice and tips on how to protect your assets. So before we get started though, let's take a moment to recognize our featured sponsors. RealtyMogul.com is an online marketplace for real estate investing, connecting borrowers and capital from accredited and institutional investors. Get a rehab loan fast and close in as little as 10 days. Rates start as low as 9%. We'd also like to thank National Real Estate Insurance Group, the nation's leading provider of insurance to the residential real estate investor market. From individual properties to large-scale investors, National Real Estate Insurance Group is ready to serve you. Please note, the views and opinions expressed by the individuals in this program do not necessarily reflect those of FlipNerd.com or any of its partners, advertisers, or affiliates. Please consult professionals before making any investment or tax decisions, as real estate investing can be risky. Hey, Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
Yeah, glad you're here. So, this is a real interesting topic that I think a lot of folks don't think about until it's too late. And, interestingly enough, for real estate investors, we buy houses from a lot of folks that you can tell, didn't have a will in place, or there's a lot of family drama that happens afterwards. So we should know better than anyone to be structured properly to protect our interests, but very often we're not. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what your firm does?
Thank you, Mike. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of California by the State Bar of California, practicing law here since 1999. My offices are in Santa Ana, which are in Orange County, California. Our focus of our practice is asset protection planning and estate planning, which encompasses the formation of entities to help our clients protect their assets against lawsuits, judgments, creditor claims, and frivolous actions against them.
Okay. And talk a little bit about, I guess when we get started, I guess we could talk about, what the right way is to set up, some of the mistakes that you see real estate investors make, and then we can maybe kind of back into folks that are already out of the chute, if they didn't get things structured properly, how they can go about doing that. So if you're getting started, what do you see a lot of mistakes that new real estate investors make?
Well, the key word is new investors, because often they don't know if they're doing this as a full-time commitment or a part-time commitment or as a hobby. And so if they're taking the approach as just doing it as a hobby, they're really going to run the risk of potentially losing a lot down the road if they don't structure their assets and their entities ahead of time. So if one is looking to purchase a property and hold on to that property as a long-term investment property, we always recommend setting up a business entity ahead of time prior to getting into escrow or getting under contract for that purchase. Usually a limited liability company works best.
Okay. And I think there's a ton of folks that ask me all the time if they should set up an LLC or an S Corp. And right. I know, in all honesty, I've had attorneys adamantly believe it should be one way or the other, and maybe that differs a little bit by state. But how do people answer that question? How do you answer that question?
Well, if the property invested is a long-term hold and they're going to continue managing and maintaining that property, our rule of thumb is the limited liability company is the better entity. It has better case law that protects the owners of the company in case of a lawsuit, as well as minimum annual filing requirements for the company. Corporations require annual minutes being drafted and placing in the corporate record book of the company each year. The LLCs don't have that requirement. They do have other corporate formality requirements, but they're much more easier to maintain. And for that note, the investor doesn't have to worry about the company each year as far as maintaining its minutes.
Right. And are there any differentiations or that you advise people on whether they are partners with somebody that they're not married to or related to necessarily? I mean, does that help determine the entity type?
Yeah. Absolutely. So if you have two investors that are friends or not husband and wife team, typically the LLC is a better way to structure that investment. Each individual can hold a membership interest, which is like a share certificate or equitable ownership of the company, and it's based on 100%. So each member can hold 50% on each of their ownership interests, and it helps keep it clearly a business ownership transaction. It doesn't commingle each owner's other personal assets into that company. It keeps everything separate. So
Sure.
it's a nice way to provide protection and the proper way to own the asset, as well as tax reporting requirements as well.
Okay. And I don't know if you have these in California, but do you have much experience with a series LLC?
California, we do not. We are familiar with them. I know Delaware has that type of legislation on their books, and we have formed series LLCs in the past for clients, and they do work well in helping the investor that has several properties and not have to set up several LLCs or corporations to hold each property. We do preach the fact that it's very good to put your eggs into separate baskets so that you can protect each property on its own. And the series LLC does help provide that type of protection.
Okay. And talk a little bit about why people would get a legal entity that's outside of the state that they operate in. I know Delaware is probably the easiest example because it's business friendly, but just talk about there's folks that have entities in lots of other states that are not where they reside. Just talk about some of the pros and cons of doing that.
Sure. Well, the pros are many times people can seek to set up an entity outside their home state. And a lot of times the reasons are, as you just mentioned, for Delaware, it is a business-friendly state, and their legislation protects the owners of these entities more so than other states. Other reasons are some states provide less cost to maintain the company, so their franchise tax fees are quite a bit less than a majority of other states. And so with the investors wanting to maintain the asset and cut down on costs annually to bring in more profits, that is a good way to accomplish that. On the con side, sometimes it might not be the best idea for local and state tax purposes. And throughout the country, as you mentioned, each state has their own set of laws. And so it's important to follow the state laws that are in effect in each state. The other con would be if you own a company out of state and you're being sued in your home state, that company needs to qualify itself to do business in your home state before it can defend itself in your home state. So there's other court or litigation requirements that a owner would need to follow if they have an out-of-state corporation and they're being sued. That corporation's being sued in their home state.
Okay. And so, what do you generally advise people just to if they're going to operate in one state to set up their entity in that state, or what's a situation where you would advise people to set it up somewhere else?
Right. So I'm in California. So a lot of our clients will hold real estate assets outside the state of California. A lot of them have properties in Florida, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. And so we always sit down, consult with the client, analyze their situation. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. Unfortunately, there's no perfect cookie cutter approach to each method of setting up their entity and choice of jurisdiction and choice of state. So when they have an out-of-state property, out-of-state, they look to set up an out-of-state entity, and that's fine. We do that quite often, but we also advise them that the state of California requires that if you hold assets even outside the state of California, the entity that you choose needs to be qualified to do business in California. California has very strict and stringent requirements on corporate choice of states where you file, and if you're doing business, even if you're doing business out of the state, California still looks to have your out-of-state company qualified to do business in California.
Okay. Well, so what are some of the mistakes that you see newer investors making whether it's cutting corners on cost or doing it themselves, or talk a little bit about some of the things you see and that you would advise people to make sure they don't get themselves into.
Sure. Well, the new investor, they want to show the rest of the world out there that they're in this business for real. So they don't want to look as if they're doing business out of the trunk of their car or their garage. And so the first thing to do is incorporate your business. Again, whether it's a corporation, an S corp, or an LLC, we can talk about that in a minute. But the idea is to show your third parties, your vendors, your escrow companies, your lenders, title, potential buyers or partners that you're a legitimate corporate entity. And so the word Inc. or LLC behind your company name adds credibility to your business model. So that's first and foremost. Second, if they don't choose the proper corporate entity and they get into a transaction, they can get hit very hard on state, local, and federal taxes if they don't have the right entity in place at the time that they enter into a transaction. So that's important. Lastly, if they don't have an entity to protect themselves and they're getting in a transaction and down the road they've been sued by that party that they've done business with and they weren't incorporated, then they would be sued personally and their personal assets would be at risk if they lose that lawsuit.
Okay. And how does somebody go about deciding what the right entity is for them? And talk a little bit about maybe you could share some experience or knowledge on trusts and land trusts and things like that. I've had a number of guests on the show, and they tend to be very adamant about one legal entity type or land trusts or whatever that might be. But what are your thoughts on trusts and land trusts and other similar entities?
We set up all different types of trusts. We do living trust, revocable trust, irrevocable trust, land trust. And the land trusts are a popular type of entity for the real estate investor that is, again, holding a property for the long term. They want to have privacy of ownership. They don't want their name all over the public record that they own these 10 different properties in a certain area. And so that's what the land trust provides. It's really a method of holding real estate with privacy so that your name is not all over the public record. And so we use that for many of our clients that have a significant number of properties that they're holding so that it's easy to set up. It's easy to transfer the property into the land trust. It provides them with the privacy, and it doesn't have the annual cost to maintain the entity as corporate entities do. So a land trust is a good way to hold title for our investor clients that have long-term holds and look to acquiring more properties.
And share some reasons why, just for those that are listening, why people would want to have that anonymity. I mean, I could think of a few reasons, but there's some that are very adamant about avoiding lawsuits because people can't find them if something comes down to that. Frivolous lawsuits, let's say. But talk about some of the reasons why folks would want to consider that.
Right. Well, we live in a world where it's very easy to pull up any information or data on anyone through the internet or any other service that provides investigation. So people, many of our clients have different reasons for wanting to be private or anonymous. So we've had law enforcement officers that invest and that have had sometimes situations where they have people that they put away to jail that they're worried about knowing where they own assets or where they live. That's one big reason.
Wow. Yeah.
Former battered wives, we've had some clients that are trying to get away from a bad relationship and they don't want the world to know where they live or what properties they own. We've had some high-profile individuals that have reasons not to want the rest of the world to know where their properties are located or whether or not they own those properties. So many times people they want that privacy. We have some clients that have not the greatest family situation, and they might have heirs in their family estate that are looking to find assets and just find information about them, and the clients just want their assets to remain private, and we respect that, and we help them to achieve that goal.
Sure. And I know you're not an accountant, but how are land trusts treated from a tax standpoint relative to other entity types?
So a land trust it's a pass-through entity. It's similar to a limited liability or a partnership, where the assets or the income or losses will pass through to the actual equitable owners, and typically whatever the income or loss is, that would be applied to their own personal 1040 tax return.
Okay. And our land trusts typically set up where they could own how many properties would you advise putting into a land trust?
Well, as I said earlier, we don't like to put all of our eggs into one basket, so we would recommend setting up separate trusts. But again, it goes into the analysis. There's no hardline approach. There's no perfect cookie cutter approach. So we look at the property itself, where it's located, what type of equity the client holds in that property, what type of liability it might pose, and if it's a risky type of property, is it an apartment building in a rough area of town, or is it a beachfront property where you're using it as a vacation home and renting it out to your friends, or is it a piece of raw land out in a industrial area? So we look at all those items, and so if you have a few properties where there's not a whole lot of risk of liability, we might recognize or advise to put those into one trust. If you have one property that has potential liability and it could pose a threat, then we would want to put that property in its land trust all on its own.
Okay. And talk a little bit about moving properties out of an existing entity. Like if folks wanted to move it into a different type of entity or a land trust, let's say, I don't want to focus too much on land trust, but into other entities, how that typically works, how easy is that, how difficult is it to kind of, if you set something up initially and you made a mistake, how do you unwind some of those things? And some of these, there's a lot of tax, in my experience, talking with attorneys that I work with and even accountants, they sometimes say conflicting things because from the accountant standpoint, sometimes moving properties into a different legal entity will trigger a sale, a taxable event. And so, but what's your general thoughts on how to move properties out of one entity into another?
Sure. So each state has different rules regarding real property transfers and the deeding process, and even what they call those deeds. You've got quit claim deeds, you've got grant deeds, you've got warranty deeds, you've got gift deeds. So all different types of deeds for each state. And so what we do is we have vendors out there that we can record a deed in any of the 50 states for our clients, because all our clients have properties all over the United States. So we provide that service to them. So we get involved in the deed transfer. So if they have it holding title and say their name and they want to get it into their trust, they want to get it into their LLC, we'll look at the particular state where the property is located. We'll also look at how the title is held right now and then where it will be held in the future. And so typically you want to show that the grantor, which is the individual, and the grantee, who is the company or the trust, the new owner, are the same parties and they hold the same proportionate interest. That way you get away from the tax issue of any type of a reassessment or any potential taxable event as far as being recognized as a sale. Some deeds you want to put no consideration or consideration of $10 on the deed. And again, there you show the world that there's no actual money being made. It's just a transfer from the individual into their trust or to their new entity. And so you avoid the tax issues as well as any local reassessment issues as well.
Okay. And so for folks that are looking for, maybe give some advice on how folks find a good attorney in their market if they're looking for somebody that can help them with real estate. What are some of the things they should look for?
Well, you want someone with experience. You want somebody that does this, week in and week out. It's not something that they just do on a side. You look at their website, look to see what services they provide or talk about on their website. Do they write blogs about this particular type of law that they practice? And in word of mouth, and I often have clients ask me for referrals from other clients or any clients that will give a testimony about us, and that's easy to do, and we put those testimonies on our website, but we also offer client testimonies to any new clients. So do your homework, do your research, make sure you're working with a person that's competent in that area. You wouldn't want to hire an immigration attorney to set your trust up for you, or help transfer your real estate into an LLC.
Right.
They're good at what they do, but you want to keep focused on someone that specializes in the area.
Sure, sure. And I know this differs substantially from state to state, but what kind of changes do you see that are coming up? It felt like things maybe got a little more litigious over the past couple of years. Maybe now that the economy is doing a little bit better, maybe that starts to slow down a little bit.
Right.
But just what are some of the changes that you see happening overall for real estate investors, and some things they should start to maybe try to anticipate?
Well, we all know it's still difficult to get loans, and that's one big thing. Hopefully, that'll be changing down the road, and that will make the economy get even better. It's good now, but I think it would be better if the lenders would make it easier to loan money to investors.
Yeah.
Our state, California, is a very litigious state. It's very easy to file a lawsuit against someone. We see it all the time, and that's why we preach the asset protection planning. And so when someone is under attack in a lawsuit, they're forced to hire an attorney and pay money to defend themselves against this particular case. And sometimes it's legitimate lawsuit, other times it's frivolous. But the problem in our state is there is no mechanism for making the loser pay. So if someone sues another person and it's a frivolous cause of action or claim, there's really no mechanism in there that will cause that person to have to pay for the winning side's attorney's fees if they do.
Right.
So our state remains a very litigious state. And so with that said, the asset protection planning that we set up ahead of time really assists in helping protect our clients' assets.
Okay. And if folks want to learn more, I know you put out a lot of good information about protecting assets on your website. Do you want to share your website and some of the things they could see there if they want to educate themselves a little bit?
Sure. My website is www.protectmyassets.com. And on there, we talk about all the different entities, all the choice of entities that are out there that we recognize and that we recommend using with our clients. So there's information on limited liability companies, the trust, the land trust, the limited partnerships, the different states, Delaware, Nevada, California, states that we use often. And then information about estate planning, which would include your revocable living trust, durable powers of attorney, last wills and testament. And so that's what we focus on, and we try to make it very educational and helpful that you can go on. We also have a blog on there as well.
Sure.
And so we provide content typically on a monthly basis there, and so it's helpful to our clients to go in and review all the new updated information.
Great. Well, Matthew, any other advice you would share for real estate investors out there that may either need to get started or maybe need to reevaluate what they have?
Well, there's other investors that we talked about a lot of long-term holds. There's other investors that want to do an assignment of escrow or a flip where they don't want to hold that property for a long term.
Yeah.
And so what we recommend in that situation is usually an S corporation, because now you're acting more or less as a business, and you're actually buying or assigning a contract to another individual, and the S corporation works better for that. Especially in California, we have a tax that's imposed on gross sales or gross receipts tax to LLCs, and so for large transactions, the LLC owner that's doing that flip or that assignment can pay a lot in taxes. The S corporation is exempt from that particular tax in California, and so.
Okay.
For the parties that are doing the flips or the assignment of escrows, the S corporation is the more preferred entity to use. Lastly, these two entities that we talked about, LLCs and S corporations, should really be owned by a living trust. They shouldn't be owned by the individual person, because if something should happen to that person, they die or become incapacitated, then their family is left with the problems of unwinding everything and having to go through the probate court process. If you properly structure the company and then you have your family trust be the owner, member, shareholder of the company, you'll avoid any probate case situation or conservatorship situation if the person becomes incapacitated. thereby making it easy for your family to take over if something should happen to you.
And you just have some sort of operating agreement that gives management rights to a certain member of the family. Is that how that works?
Absolutely. The operating agreement will appoint the individual as the manager. If they want a secondary manager or an officer, we can appoint those people so that there is it's easy to maintain and manage the company on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Wow, that's great. Well, Matthew, thanks for sharing all your great insights today. We definitely appreciate your time.
You're welcome, Mike. Thanks for having me.
And for those that are interested, we'll put the link down below, but protectmyassets.com. I've been to your site. There's a lot of great information out there just for those that even want to educate themselves a bit. So check that out. So thanks again, Matthew.
Thank you, Mike.
Have a great day. Are you a member of FlipNerd.com, the most robust real estate investing platform in existence, where you can find off-market wholesale deals and great vendors literally in your market? You can get access to advice from experts and learn about local clubs and events right in your backyard. If not, please visit FlipNerd.com and register for a free account. You can register in less than a minute. It's pretty much the coolest site that's ever existed in the real estate investing industry, so get on over to FlipNerd.com.